My favorite skeleton. My favorite skeleton.
Thank you. Okay, excuse me. Just Demetrius. Let's meet Demetrius.
Oh, I did?
Testing.
Good morning, students, faculty, and guests. Today is a special day as we welcome a guest speaker into IAT. Before we begin, I'd like to explain something about the special guest and let you guys get to know him a little better. He was born in South Africa and spent his life as a social political activist, author, speaker, and an agent of change.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alexandra Ferguada, and I am the senior class president. Our speaker is a very important speaker, and he has spoken all around the world. He has shared his grandfather's message at several museums, organizations, and to even political figures such as former President Bill Clinton. His programs have changed the lives of over 500,000 people and in over 300 villages, and they still continue to grow.
Be the change you want to see in the world. Good morning, everyone. My name is Carl Kinham, and our guest speaker today has dedicated his life to that goal and being the change he wants to see in the world. Dr. Gandhi has founded the Gandhi Worldwide Education Institution, which is a nonprofit organization that works to realize the vision of this namesake. The institution's mission is to help individuals and communities develop the practical skills and inner resources needed to achieve a nonviolent, sustainable, and just world. The M.K. Gandhi Institution for Nonviolence is located at the University of Rochester. Dr. Gandhi has received many honorary degrees and also participated in many notable interfaith activities. It is now my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you all Dr. Arun Gandhi.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you. When I got up this morning and I saw the snow, I said, oh my God, how am I going to get to the school? And I was hoping maybe the school is closed today. I sent a text message to your teacher and she said, no, it's not closed, it's open and we are going ahead with the program. So it's nice that all of you have been able to come and that I've been able to come thanks to your teacher, Ms. Kaparko, who came and picked me up. Well, today I wanted to share with you some of the philosophy of nonviolence, especially in the sense that nonviolence is not a weapon that you can use when convenient and discard when not. It is a way of life. We have to understand it and make it a part of our life. Because violence is not just physical violence. It's not just the wars and all the fighting and killing in the streets that take place, but we commit violence in many different ways that sometimes we don't even understand. And this happens because over the years, over the centuries, we have created a whole culture of violence, a culture of violence that dominates every aspect of our lives. Our sports has become violent, our entertainment is violent, our relationships are violent, everything about us is violent. And in that kind of violent atmosphere, it's very difficult to create peace there. A lot of people think that peace is just the absence of war, that if we are not fighting a war with anybody or if we are not fighting in the streets, that we are living in peace. That's not true because we are committing violence in non-physical ways that we sometimes don't even recognize. And I learned about this when I was a 12-year-old boy and I was living with my grandfather. And like you have a paper and pencil to do your lessons with, he gave me a notebook and a pencil to do my lessons with. And one day I was walking back from my tuition and I looked at the pencil, it was just about 3 inches long. And I thought to myself, I deserve a better pencil. This is too small for me to use. And without a second thought, I just threw the pencil away because I was so sure grandfather would give me a new pencil when I asked him for it. But that evening when I met grandfather and asked him for a new pencil, instead of giving me one, he subjected me to a lot of questions. He wanted to know how the pencil became small and where did I throw it away and why did I throw it away and on and on. And I couldn't understand why he was making such a fuss over a little pencil until he told me to go out and look for it. And I said, you must be kidding. He said, you don't expect me to look for a little pencil in the dark? He said, oh yes, I do. Here's a flashlight. And he sent me out with a flashlight to look for his pencil, and I must have spent about 2 hours searching for it. And when I finally found it and brought it to him, he said, now I want you to sit here and learn 2 very important lessons. The first lesson is that even in the making of a simple thing like a pencil, we use a lot of the world's natural resources And when we throw them away, we are throwing away the world's natural resources, and that is violence against nature. And the second lesson is that because in an affluent society we can afford to buy all these things in bulk, we overconsume the resources of the world. And because we overconsume them, we are depriving people elsewhere of these resources, and they have to live in poverty. And that is violence against humanity. And that was the first time I realized that all of these little things that we do every day, consciously and unconsciously, it's become so much a part of our life. Things that we throw away and overconsume, like food, for instance. We take more food than we need, and then we can't finish all of it, and we just dump the rest of it into the garbage. Now, just a few months ago, the New York Times had a feature in which they said that in the United States alone, in this country alone, we throw away $160 billion worth of food every year. $160 billion worth of food goes into the garbage every year, when people in this country go to bed hungry, let alone all the people in the world who are starving and hungry. But in our own country here, more than 1 million people go to bed hungry because they don't have food. And yet we throw away so much food. Now that is the worst form of violence. So every time we destroy something or we throw away something because we have so much of it and we don't really care, then we are committing violence. And to make me understand this lesson thoroughly, he made me draw a genealogical tree of violence. Just as you do a family tree. Have you all done a family tree or seen a family tree with the grandparents and then have all the kids and siblings and all that? Well, in the same way, he made me do a tree of violence, with violence as the grandparent and physical violence and passive violence as the two branches. And every day before I went to bed, I had to analyze and examine everything that I had experienced during the day. Things that I may have done to other people or people may have done to me. Everything had to be analyzed and examined and put in their appropriate places on that tree. Now, if it was the kind of violence where we use physical force, all the fighting and kicking and beating and punching and murders and rapes and all of these things that we do in society, that would go under physical violence. But if we don't use physical violence and yet we hurt people directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously, then that would be passive violence. And the way I had to determine whether this is passive violence or not was to ask myself, if somebody were to do this to me, would I be hurt by it or would I be helped by it? And if I came to the conclusion that it would hurt me, then that would be passive violence. And that could take, shape in any different ways, like prejudices, racism, looking down on people, dividing people, overconsumption of resources, throwing away food, wasting things. All of these things where we don't use any physical force, and yet our attitude hurts people, then that would be passive violence. And when I began to do this introspection, I was amazed that within a few months I was able to fill up the whole wall in my room with acts of passive violence. The physical violence didn't grow very much because there's a limit to physical violence that one can commit to. But the passive violence grew endlessly. And then grandfather explained to me the connection between the two. Said we commit passive violence all the time, every day, consciously and unconsciously. And that generates anger in the victim, and the victim then resorts to physical violence to get justice. Because that's what justice has come to mean today. Justice, as we practice it today, it's about revenge, about making somebody pay for what has happened to us. And so the victims of passive violence seek justice by resorting to violence. And on the other hand, the authorities seek justice by locking people away and throwing the keys away. Now, neither of this is the right way of doing it, because punishing people who do wrong things, just locking them up and throwing the key away, it's not the right way. Because what we need to do is to transform them, to make them realize that what they have done is wrong and that they should do it the right way so that we can all live in peace together. But if we continue to just lock people away in prisons, we have to build so many prisons and lock away so many thousands of people all the time, and they come out from the prisons as stronger criminals instead of better human beings. So we want people who go into prison to come out as better human beings and not just as strong criminals. I do a lot of work in the prison system. I go to Groveland Prison down the road from here, and I work with people there. And one of the things that they always told me in the past when I began this work is that you want us to change. And even if we become saints, the society is never going to accept us back again. So why should we bother to change it? And I told them, I said, you're going to change not because you want to impress the society, but you're going to change because you know that is the right thing to do. And you're going to change for yourself, not do something to impress somebody else. And that, made sense to them, and they began to change, and there's been a tremendous improvement in the relationships there. The superintendent was telling me the other day that their rate of violence within the prison system has dropped by nearly 70%. So this is what nonviolence is, and this is what we all need to understand, that it is about transforming ourselves, changing ourselves, learning to build better relationships with each other. Today, our relationships are the poorest because all of us are trying to get something out of the relationship. We build a relationship with somebody with the intention of getting something out of them. And the moment we stop getting anything from them, we break up the relationship. And that is a very negative way of building a relationship. The relationships ideally should be built on the 4 principles of respect, understanding, acceptance, and appreciation. We have to respect ourselves and respect our connection with all of creation. This myth about we being independent individuals and we can do whatever we like and we don't have to care about anybody, that's a myth. That's not the right thing. We are all interconnected and interrelated, and we have to respect that. And once we learn to respect that, then we will be able to understand who we are and what we are and why are we here on earth. We are not here by accident. We are here for a purpose. And the purpose that we are here for, in a very general sense, is to make this world a better place than we had found it. By our existence, we should make this world a better place. And all of us can do that. If we live properly, if we create an ideal society by creating ideal neighborhoods and relationships, then we can begin to improve society and take it out of that culture of violence. So when we understand that role that we have to play, then we will be able to accept each other as human beings and not define people by all the labels we have put upon ourselves. Today we have so many labels that we have forgotten that behind those labels there is a human being. We have race labels, color labels, economic labels, religious labels, gender labels, you name it, and we have a label for it. So we have to remove all those labels and just begin to look at each other as human beings and respect each other and treat each other as human beings. And only then will we be able to accept our own humanity. So these are the ways in which ideal relationships must be built in society. And this is something that all of us can do, beginning in the school here and taking it outside, becoming ideal people and creating an ideal community. It starts at that level and grows from there. Once you have an ideal community, it transfers into an ideal city, a neighborhood and city, and it just grows, and eventually we have an ideal nation. So it is about each one of us understanding our role and being willing to fulfill that role to the best of our abilities. Your teachers are going to come with me to India, some of them, and they're going to share with you what they see there and what they learn there. India is a very different country. It's very diverse. It's it's very big, and there's many more million people in India than you can see here in the United States. One of the first things that they are going to be affected by is the crowds. You walk out into the streets and you'll see thousands of people walking around in the streets or trying to sell things there. And so it's not like here, you can walk down some streets here and not see a soul. But there you'll go walk on any street and you'll see thousands of people walking around and many people living on the streets. There's so much homelessness where there are many people who just live out in the open in the streets. You see diversity in economics. You'll see huge, big modern buildings, skyscrapers, and right next to it you'll see slums and poor people living there. I had a very interesting experience a few years ago when I had some students and professors from Wellesley College. For those of you who don't know about Wellesley College, it's a very high-end women's college in Massachusetts. And there they teach women to be very independent and be able to do things for themselves. And so we had these students and teachers who came with us on that trip. And part of the trip, at that time at least, we were doing by bus and going out into the villages. So life was not like here, because the bus rides were through dusty roads and some of the hotels we stayed in during that time were very clean hotels, but they didn't have things like showers in the bathroom. They would give you a bucket and you have to fill the bucket with hot and cold water and then pour over your body and have a bath. Now, these women didn't know about that because they've never experienced that. They didn't know how to take a bath. So after a few days, they were getting a little bit restless, and they were whispering among themselves, when are we going to have a proper bed to sleep in and a proper shower when we can wash our hair and all that. And I could hear them whispering there. And so after, I think, about 5 days, we reached a city of Ahmedabad, and somebody had just opened a brand new 5-star hotel. And as a promotion, they gave us rooms in the hotel at half price. And so we took the room. And while we were standing in the lobby waiting for our rooms to be assigned, you should have seen the joy in these women. Finally they saw the luxuries that they were used to. And they were whispering, they said, now finally we're going to sleep well in a proper bed. We're going to have a shower and wash our hair and all that. They were just bubbling with enthusiasm. And then they went to their rooms, and half an hour later they came back looking for me. And they said, Mr. Gandhi, we have to move from here. We can't stay here. I said, what happened? Just moments ago you were so full of joy and happy, and now suddenly you want to change. What happened? They said, well, we went up to the room and looked out of the window, and we see all the poor people living right below us in slums in horrible conditions, and we feel guilty that they have to live like that and we are living in all this luxury. And I said, no, we're not going to move from here, but this is going to be a learning experience for you, because this is the reality of the world. That half of the world has all the luxuries and things that we enjoy, and the other half of the world doesn't have anything at all. So I said, you're going to see this every day, and you're going to learn about what your responsibilities are. How can we change so that that other half of the world is able to enjoy a better standard of living there. And they stayed there. I don't know how much of it they learned because I haven't been able to keep up with them. But this is the kind of disparities you're going to see because it still exists. And it exists side by side, and they're, very happy living there. But I can't describe to you the whole country because it'll take a whole day to talk to you about it. But it has all the diversities you can think about. It has 26 official languages. It's not just one language. We speak in 26 different languages, and there's 850 dialects, and there's economic diversity, there's religion. Every religion of the world is represented in India. So you can have every possible religious groups living there side by side, sometimes fighting, especially the Hindus and the Muslims, but for the most part they live happily together. So it's a very diverse country, and you'll be seeing it, and I hope you'll enjoy the lessons there. And someday I hope, if I'm still alive, that some of you will come on that tour and experience it for yourselves. So with these remarks, I will now invite you to ask me questions. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
You guys have any questions for Dr. Gandhi? Go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. I know you how got your grandfather he taught you like a lot of stuff about the way he lived and about peace and nonviolence. What's the biggest difference, like, in mindset between you and Gandhi? Well, you and your grandfather.
Well, the biggest difference is dress. If you seen his photographs, you saw how he dresses. There he had the minimum clothes because he said as long as the poorest in the country cannot afford to buy clothes, I have no right to wear anything more. So he wore clothes, minimum clothes. And I, of course, and you see, I don't do that. I wear all the normal clothes of Western culture. That's the biggest difference. But otherwise, I think his sense of purpose and his commitment to his philosophy perhaps is much more than my commitment. Yeah.
When you were growing up, did he ever discipline you? And how?
Yeah, he did discipline me, and even my parents believed in the same way of disciplining, and so we were not punished. My parents did penance when we did something wrong, and there was one instance that I want to share with you when I was about 16 years old, and we were living in South Africa, and the concept of ashram, community living, where all people who believe in peace and non-violence would come and live together, and kind of community living. In India, it's called an ashram. And so this place was 18 miles outside the city of Durban. And today we drive 18 miles to go anywhere, and even 80 miles to go and have fun. But in those days, driving 18 miles into town to go and meet friends or just have fun was not a practical thing. And especially because my parents had also taken vows of voluntary poverty. So when we were growing up, we didn't get the opportunity to go into town and visit friends and see a movie or something very frequently. So one Saturday when my dad had to go to town to attend a conference, he didn't feel like driving that day, and he asked me if I would drive him into town, and I jumped at the opportunity and said yes. And since I was going into town, my mom gave me a list of groceries that she needed. And on the way into town, my dad reminded me of all the little chores that had been pending for a long time, like getting the car serviced and oil changed and all that. And he said, since you have the whole day to yourself, will you please attend to all of these things? And I said, okay. And I went and dropped him off at the auditorium, and he told me, come and pick me up at 5 and we'll go home together. And I said, all right. And I rushed off and I did all my chores and bought all the groceries I was expected to buy and did everything I had to do. And I found that there was still time to catch a matinee show. So I left the car in the garage and told them to do whatever was necessary, and I rushed off to the movie theater. And they had a John Wayne double feature going on. And I got so engrossed in the movie that I didn't realize the passage of time. The movie ended at 5:30. And I ran from there to the garage and got the car and rushed to where my dad was waiting for me. It was almost 6 when I reached there, and he was naturally anxious and wondering what happened to me. And so the first question he asked me when I reached there was, why are you late? And instead of telling him the truth, I was so ashamed to tell him that I was watching a John Wayne double feature that I decided to lie to him, and I said the car wasn't ready, I had to wait for the car. Not realizing that he had already called the garage and asked her. When he caught me in the lie, he said, there's something wrong in the way I brought you up. that didn't give you the confidence to tell me the truth, and that you felt you had to lie to me. And I've got to find out where I went wrong with you. And in order to do that, he said, I'm going to walk home 18 miles. I'm not coming with you in the car. There was absolutely nothing I could do to make him change his mind. He just started walking. It was after 6 o'clock in the evening. Much of those 18 miles were through sugarcane plantations, dirt roads, no lights, late night. I couldn't leave him and go away. So for nearly 6 hours, I was crawling behind him, watching him go through that pain and agony for a stupid lie that I uttered. And I decided then and then that I was never going to lie again. So that's the kind of punishment you get if you practice the culture of nonviolence. So it's the parents who take the responsibility of not teaching their children the right way of behaving. But for that to happen, there has to be a loving relationship between the parents and the children. We have to have a very respectful and loving relationship. If we don't have that, then we wouldn't care at all if the parents did parents. So everything is connected.
What was the last memory you remember having with your grandfather?
Last memory with my grandfather, I think, would be I'm trying to get his autograph. You know, he at that time, even as he was fighting for India's independence, he was also concerned about emancipation of the Indian women, the education of children, and the emancipation of the so-called untouchable people. So he had programs going on in all these different fields. And as you know, all these programs need to be funded. And at that time, much of the funding was controlled by the British, and they were not willing to give funding to grandfather. And so he decided the easiest way for him to raise money that he needed was to sell his autograph. And every morning and evening, when thousands of people would attend his prayer services, and his prayers were ecumenical. We prayed Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, all major religions of the world. We prayed in their different prayers. Sitting in a room like this, and we would sing all the different prayers. So it was teaching us to respect all the different religions and to treat all the different religions as one, because God is one and religion is one, and religion to him was like climbing a mountain. We are all going up to the same peak, so why should it matter which side of the mountain we choose to climb up from? So when he had those prayer meetings, thousands of people would attend, and many of them would want his autograph. So he put a fee of 5 rupees, which in today's money would be about approximately $5 for each autograph. And when I was living with him, it was my duty to go out into the audience and collect the autograph books and the money and bring it to him for his signature. And one day I thought to myself, if everybody could get his autograph, why not me? After all, I'm his grandson and I deserve an autograph too. But I didn't have any money. So I got myself a little book and I slipped it into the pile, hoping that he wouldn't notice the absence of money. But when he came to that book, he said, why is there no money for this autograph? And I said, because it's my book. And he said, well, you should know that I don't make an exception even for grandsons. That if you want an autograph, you'll not only have to pay me for it, but you'll have to earn the money and pay me. Don't ask your parents for it. And I said, no way. He said, you're my grandfather and I'm going to make you give me this autograph. So he laughed and said, all right, let's see who wins. And from that day, every day when he was in high-level political discussions with British politicians or Indian politicians, I would barge into the room with my autograph book and thrust it in his face and demand an autograph. My logic was that just to get rid of me, he would sign his name and give it to me. But instead, every time I became too boisterous, all he did was put his hands across my mouth, press my head against his chest, and went on talking politics. On many occasions, the other politicians used to get exasperated and tell grandfather, why don't you give him the autograph? He disturbs our meetings every day. And grandfather would just smile and say, this is a private joke between the two of us. You don't have to get involved in it. But although I tried for weeks to get it, he never gave me the autograph. But he never ever told me to get out of the room and leave him alone. As we do with our siblings or our children, we are working on something important, and if somebody comes to disturb us, we scream at them and tell them, get out, can't you see I'm busy just now? He never ever did that to me. And that's when I realized that if he could control his anger to that extent, if we try to achieve 50% of it, we will make a tremendous difference in the level of violence that we experience today. Today, Harvard University has recently done a study, and they show that more than 80% of the violence that we experience in our lives, either in our personal lives or in the lives of our nations, is generated by anger. We get angry and we just explode and we say things and we do things that sometimes changes the course of our lives completely. And yet it's very funny, I was just thinking about this a few days ago. If we are walking down the street and a stranger comes up to us and says, give me $10, how many of you would give $10? You just give it without thinking.
I did it before.
Sorry?
I did it before. I did it before.
You've done it before.
You the guy.
Well, most of us, we'll say, well, you must be crazy. Why should I give you $10? And we walk away from it. But yet, that same stranger can do something to provoke us, and we immediately sacrifice our lives for it. You know how many times we've been provoked? You drive down, somebody cuts you off, and you get so mad at them, and you swear at them, and that's the least you can do. Recently, I don't know if you heard on the news, some guy in California was so mad at a woman who cut him off that he went after her and pushed her car over the road and almost killed her. And that's happened very often in our country. And even otherwise, all these people sitting in the prisons, all of them tell me that they acted in a moment of madness, in a moment when they got angry, so angry that they did something stupid, and now they're paying the price in the prisons. So we are willing to succumb very quickly to anger and do something that will change the course of our lives completely. And yet we don't have to do it. If we can control our anger and not use it, and not abuse it, but use it intelligently. And that was one of the lessons that my grandfather taught me. He said anger is like electricity. It is just as useful and just as powerful, but only if we use it intelligently. But it can be just as destructive and deadly if we abuse it. So just as we channel electrical energy and bring it into our lives and use it for the good of humanity, we must learn to channel anger in the same way so that we can use that energy for the good of humanity rather than abuse anger and cause grief. So it's very important for us to learn this lesson about anger because it contributes to so much of our violence. Yes.
When you leave today, they're going to start their capstone project. Some of them have already started picking topics. And these capstone projects are change projects. So they could either leave a legacy here at school, or they can design a project that will help them, further advance themselves when they graduate, whether it's a career path they want to study or something. Maybe they want to start their own foundation, what have you, whatever they'd like to do. It's really up to them. They're becoming change agents. And you've transformed schools, villages, people's lives. What advice would you give them moving forward after today to design their change process?
Well, there are many fascinating things that we can do. One of the things that we have to take into consideration is our resources. How much do we have? What kind of resources do we have? And how can we use those resources to bring about a change? Now, everybody doesn't have too many resources to do things, but we all have some resources and we can make small differences everywhere. It's also a question of seeing what is wrong in our societies, in our neighborhoods, in ourselves, in our homes or wherever, and see how can we help to change this, make it better, a better place. One very fascinating thing that you will see when we take your teachers on this tour, one of the places is called Barefoot College. And it's called Barefoot College because it's meant for absolutely poor and ignorant women. And what this one person who graduated as an electrical engineer from a very prestigious school, the equivalent of MIT, and that person could have gotten a very high-paid job and could have had a wonderful life for himself. But he decided before he takes a job or settles down in life that he wants to serve the poor people in a village for 1 year. And he went to this village and he saw the plight of the women. They were in real misery there because they were suffering from poverty and they were suffering from male dominance. And so they were really at the bottom of the pit kind of thing. And he decided to lift them up. And he said, I'll teach you how to produce solar energy. He taught them how to make solar panels with cheaply available material. He taught them how to wire their homes and put in all the fittings and everything. In 6 months, he declared them to be solar engineers. He gave them certificates, and they went out and started electrifying their villages with solar energy. And when he began to saw the success of the first class, he just went on doing it, and now it's more than 35 years. He has forgotten about his job and getting a normal life. He just devoted his life to helping these women. And over the 35 years, he's helped millions of women learn about solar energy and how to use it for cooking, how to use it for electrification, lights, and so on. And that program came to the notice of the United Nations. And the United Nations asked him if he would consider teaching this to some of the African women. And he said yes, and he identified 10 of the poorest African nations and invited them to send African women to India, to this college, to get education. And it's fascinating to see how these illiterate Indian women are teaching the illiterate African women without a common language. They don't have a language to speak with each other. It is just through sign language and color coding and whatever, they just found a way of communication and they teach each other. And now he has trained so many African women that they've opened barefoot colleges in their own countries and are teaching more and more. So one man in 35 years has transformed the lives of millions of women everywhere. So we have to be, more open-minded, conscious, and see what we can do to fulfill the needs of our neighborhood.
What was your first thought when you found out you had moved in with your grandfather?
My first thought,
Yes.
well, I was, living in South Africa, and the last time I met my grandfather, I was about 5 years old, and didn't remember a lot about that time. So it was a mixed feeling. I was happy in one sense that I was going to my grandfather and going to another country to be with him. And especially because at that time, South Africa had a lot of prejudices against people of color. And it was simply black and white issue. If you were not white, you were black. It didn't matter where you came from, which race you belonged to. It was just purely black and white. And so there was a lot of discrimination, and I felt it all the time when I was growing up. I didn't like it at all. And so it was, in that sense, I was happy to get away from it. But I was also a little bit conflicted because, going to a place that I didn't know and I didn't know what to expect there. But then eventually everything worked out fine. Yeah.
So the topic of my capstone is that it's for me to study that why are people rejected by society, and no matter what country you're from, just because they're different. And even though in modern times a lot of people are accepted that they're different, why do you think there's still just a handful of people who just don't want to be bothered with people who are different?
I think it's part of the culture of violence, and the culture of violence. We are always distinguishing people by their color or their race and their religion and so on. And then, we have this very exploitative society. We are trying to exploit each other all the time to get something out of them. And when we can't exploit them, then we don't care about them. So all of these things in the culture of violence that leads us to look down on people who are not like us. Yes.
What's one of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome?
Biggest challenges, I think, I haven't thought about that, but just transforming people and making them realize that we can change is perhaps the biggest challenge. Yes. Yes.
Did you teach your children the way Gandhi taught you?
Yes, I tried to, and I did have to walk sometimes.
You're gonna get a chance to interact with his son who lives in India, right?
Yeah, my son lives in India, and he's going to be on the tour, and I think he'll be on the Skype with you guys sometime. Yeah.
What was the hardest decision you made?
Hardest decision I made. Well, there were many different decisions I had to make in my life, which were pretty hard. When, I went to India first in 19, well, as an adult, first time in 1956 after my father died. And the intention was to just go and perform the last rites and then come back to South Africa and live with my mom and my two sisters. But while I was in India, I had a sudden attack of appendicitis and had to undergo surgery, and I fell in love with my nurse. And after a while, I decided to marry her, and the South African government wouldn't allow me to bring her back with me. They said I could come alone, but not with her. And so it meant abandoning my mom and my two sisters and living in India with my wife. I think that was one major decision in my life. There have been a few more also. Yeah.
If your granddad was still here, what would you say to him?
My granddad was what?
So what would you like to say to him?
If he was still here. Well, I wish he was still here. I would learn so much more from him. I'm just sorry that I was 12 years old and naive, and I didn't understand the importance of all the things that he taught me until he was no longer there. But I often wish he was, and then I could learn more and more from him and make this world a better place.
Anybody else?
What made you want to continue your grandfather's legacy?
Well, I thought I had a legacy that I inherited and which made a very big difference in my life. And I thought it would be very selfish of me to just keep it for myself. I should try to help other people change just as I changed. There's a very nice story that my grandfather used to tell us when we were growing up of an ancient Indian king who once became very curious about the meaning of peace. And he invited all the intellectuals in his kingdom to come and explain the meaning of peace. And everybody came there and did their best, but nobody could satisfy the king. And then one day there was an intellectual from another town who came on a visit, and the king asked him the meaning of peace. And he said, the only person who can give you a satisfactory answer is an old sage. He lives outside your kingdom, but he is so old that he cannot come to you. You will have to go to him and ask him this question. So the next day the sage went to the king went to the sage and asked him the meaning of peace. And the sage quietly went to the back of the house and came back with a grain of wheat and placed that grain of wheat on the king's palm and said, here is your answer. And of course the king didn't know what a grain of wheat had to do with peace. And he didn't want to show his ignorance. So he quietly clutched that grain of wheat and went back to his palace, found a little gold box, and he placed that grain of wheat in the box. And every day he would open the box to look for an answer, and he couldn't find any answer. So when this intellectual came back on a return visit, the king asked him to explain. He said, you sent me to the sage, he gave me this grain of wheat, and I don't know what a grain of wheat has to do with peace. And that's when the intellectual said, it's very simple. He said, as long as you keep this grain of wheat in this box, nothing is going to happen. It will eventually rot and perish, and that will be the end of the story. But if you had allowed this grain of wheat to interact with all the elements, if you had planted this grain outside in the soil, it would sprout and grow, and very soon you could have a whole field of wheat. And that is the meaning of peace. But if somebody has kept peace for themselves, and it'll perish with them. But if they let it interact with all the elements, it would sprout and grow, and very soon we could have a whole world of peacemakers.
What happened to all of your grandfather's followers after he passed?
Oh, they're still following him in various different ways, still living his philosophy and making changes in the world.
They know who you are when you're in India, don't they? I mean, they know.
Well, not
They see the
everybody.
chart on the news and things like that, right?
Not everybody, but some people do. Now, for instance, I've been away from the country for 30 years. I do go every year, but I'm just there for a month and I spend a very quiet time. I don't make a public appearance or anything there. So people, new generations don't know about me so much. Now they recognize me as Tushar's father. So he's better known because he lives there and he's on TV all the time. So he's pretty well known.
Next question, anybody have a last question for you?
All done?
Excellent question,
Let's
Joe.
give them a round of applause.
Hello everyone, my name is Celia Figueroa. On behalf of the students and staff here at Integrated Arts Technology, we'd like to give you a small token of our appreciation for coming out to speak to us today. We have all benefited and learned valuable lessons from you and your grandfather's work and message. Please accept this small donation as a token of our appreciation from our senior class.
Well, thank you very much. This is wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I heard that was, this is a picture of you and
Yeah.
your grandfather together.
Yeah, that's my mom.
Yeah.
So the last thing we're gonna do is take a group shot. Are you okay with that? A group
Yeah.
picture with everybody around you?
Sure.
Okay, so let's have, we'll pull some chairs and we'll have a bunch of students sitting in the front, maybe like 15 in the front, and then we'll try and gather around all the things and posters in the back. So let's have the